Thank you, everyone, for being here. We're waiting just a few more minutes for Mr. Young to arrive, and we'll start as soon as he gets here. Thank you. The Subcommittee on National Parks, Forests, and Public Lands will now come to order. The subcommittee is meeting today to hear testimony on the impacts of climate change on public lands and to consider adaptation opportunities. Under Committee Rule 4F, any oral opening statements at hearings are limited to the chairman and ranking minority member. Therefore, I ask unanimous consent that all other members' opening statements be made part of the hearing record if they are submitted to the clerk by 5 p.m. today. Hearing no objection, so ordered. Today is an exciting day. It will be the first of a new era for this committee and for this Congress, an era of inclusion where the diverse voices of the American people are clearly heard in these halls. We will uphold our public lands as a point of pride that all Americans can share and co-own. These special places will serve as refuge for our highest values and as places of growth toward our nation's future. I want to start this hearing, the first of the 116th Congress for this subcommittee, by thanking my fellow members for joining me in this important work. I'm grateful for the confidence you have expressed in selecting me to chair this subcommittee. It is my sincere hope that we will find common ground on important issues, and I promise you that we will lead this Congress, the most diverse in history, toward bold policy solutions that benefit our federal lands and our communities. We begin that leadership today as we confront the most pressing issue facing our nation, which is climate change. We'll hear testimony from a leading scientist about the disproportionate impact climate change is already having on our public lands. Our national parks are warming twice as fast as the rest of the country. Parks in the Southwest, my home, and the home of many of my fellow members here on this dais, are experiencing unprecedented aridity. That means less water for our ecosystems, which in turn means less water for our homes and our farmers, because we live in a deeply interconnected world where changes to one system impact all others. We rely on the natural world to provide us with many of the things we depend on each day, from clean water and clean air to flood control and coastal protection. At a time when these natural services are under threat from global climate change, Americans will require strong leadership to ensure that we're ready to adapt to these changes and to meet these challenges. Unfortunately, the Trump administration has failed to provide this leadership. They see fit to pursue energy dominance at all costs, to push an extractive and destructive agenda that has left our public lands responsible for nearly 1/4 of all CO2 emissions. At the same time, the administration has suppressed science and prevented adaptation. They canceled executive orders outlining adaptation strategies on public lands and even pulled back guidance on climate change and national security. They ignored the science of climate change, relying on outdated and inadequate mandates, and put Americans in harm's way. If this administration will not take the lead, this committee will. Dr. Gonzalez will help us to understand the threat we face by explaining the impact climate change will have on our public lands. We will then hear from a top climate change adaptation scientist, Dr. Lara Hansen, because we can no longer afford to stand on the sidelines and do nothing. It is time for America to act on climate change, and our public lands are one of the best resources for us to do so. Public lands protect biodiversity and the ecosystems on which our daily lives depend. They provide space for the natural world to adapt to the new climate we have created. And they form the backbone of nearly $1 trillion outdoor recreation economy that can help us create good, clean jobs. Climate change is an unprecedented challenge that will require big and bold solutions. Today, we take the first step toward meaningful action by hearing the risks we face and by considering how we can prepare our communities, our country, and our public lands for the challenges climate change presents. Thank you all for joining me here today. I look forward to our leadership on these issues. Thank you again to the witnesses. I look forward to your testimony. I now recognize Ranking Member Mr. Curtis for his opening statement.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to sit in for our ranking member, Don Young. And on his behalf and all of our behalf, I'd like to congratulate Representative Holland on her election to the House of Representatives and for being selected as the new chair of the National Parks, Forest, and Public Lands Subcommittee. I will now read Mr. Young's statement. I look forward to working with her in this Congress and the many important land management issues facing our country. Today, we meet to discuss the impacts of climate change on our federal lands and to examine adaptation opportunities. It is certainly my hope that we will use this time to discuss innovative land management solutions that fall under this subcommittee's jurisdiction. All too often, this issue has been used as a vehicle to push a radically progressive agenda that would prove to be devastating for American families and would offer minimal, at best, climate results. Among the policy goals that have been expressed includes calls for complete elimination of air travel, cows, and nuclear energy. Fear-mongering and unrealistic rhetoric should have no place in this debate. Instead, we should focus on pragmatic solutions that offer realistic environmental solutions. And on that note, I would like to turn the microphone over to Ranking Member Don Young to finish his statement.
Madam Chair, I apologize.
No need to apologize.
I will say that those that live on the hill that got it made, those that live 25 miles out, it's not good. I hate the traffic.
We're happy to see you.
Well, I'm here. First, let me congratulate you for being chairman. And I do apologize. This is a very important committee. I would say, seriously, we ought to start thinking about reducing carbon emissions, but we also ought to be talking about how do we address that in some of the areas which we have been working on. I think we have to look at the forest. This is something I'm very interested in because we have the largest national forest in America and Alaska, and we have lost use of that. 16.8 million acres of the forest. Only 4% has been managed for timber production, and consequently we have a very large forest that have dead trees. We've had that in other areas. I can tell you that in Alaska, because we did not harvest some trees, I'm not saying all, we've lost 2 pulp mills, the 5 large sawmills, and a lot of small mills, but we also lost 6,000 good, high-paying, middle-class jobs. For what cause, I don't know. They say, well, we got to protect it, but when we don't manage, we lose the forest. This has happened in the lower 48. People will talk to that, as we know. Tremendous forest fires is a loss, and it also contributes to the carbon, the gases in the air and the particulate amount in the air. And so I suggest respectfully one of our jobs is to see whether we can manage better instead of saying no, what we can do. Other countries have done beautifully. Sweden, if you go to Sweden, they've managed their forest for centuries. And they produce a lot of timber and they employ a lot of people. And it looks like a brand new forest. So that's something we have to consider. And I do think this is a great hearing. We have good witnesses today. There are differences of opinion. I just want us to adapt as part of this hearing. And I suggest I'm happy with what we're proceeding here, and I would submit the rest of my record and yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Curtis and Mr. Young. I'd like to introduce our witnesses. Under our committee rules, oral statements are limited to 5 minutes, but your entire statement will appear in the hearing record. The lights in front of you will turn yellow when there is 1 minute left, and then red when time is expired. After the witnesses have testified, members will be given the opportunity to ask questions. The chair now recognizes Dr. Patrick Gonzalez for 5 minutes.